Good evening. Welcome to the Super Saturday debate. I'm Zakir Jacob. The Modi government seems to be moving towards holding elections simultaneously for the Lok Sabha as well as for various state assemblies. The central government has set up a panel to explore the possibility of one nation, one election, which will be headed by former President Ramnath Kovind. The other members of the panel now will include Home Minister Amit Shah, Leader of the Opposition in the Congress Party in the Lok Sabha, Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, Ghulam Nabi Azad, former Congress leader, former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. It will also have N.K. Singh, the former Chief of the 15th Finance Commission, Senior Advocate in the Supreme Court, Harish Salve, among others. Now, this panel will commence functioning immediately. It will also make recommendations on whether or not one nation, one poll is feasible. But the crux of the matter is this. The opposition is saying, how can you have one representative from government and only one representative from the opposition, which happens to be Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary of the Congress? The critical factor is that regional parties say they will be disproportionately affected by one nation, one polls, and not one of them has been represented in this committee. But first, the story. All right, so what exactly will this expert panel do? Number one, it will examine, it will also recommend the rules that need to be amended, the articles of the Constitution that need to be amended in order to be enabling one nation, one poll. Number two, it will also examine the Representation of People's Act 1951. This is one of the oldest serving laws in the country. It needs to be amended to accommodate one nation, one poll. Also, it will examine if states need to ratify the amendment. 50% of state legislatures need to say yes to one nation, one poll. It will also analyze and recommend solutions to various scenarios. What if there's a hung assembly? What if there is president's rule? What if there are defections? Those are questions that need to be answered by the committee. Also, number five, it will seek opinion from various stakeholders, despite the fact that the opposition has only representation from the Congress party and no other regional party. Now, the question is, one nation, one poll, is it possible? Here's what past committees, commissions, which have been formed with the express intention of finding out the possibility, the feasibility of one nation, one election. This is what they have said. The Law Commission that was headed by Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy had said back in 1999 that we must end the cycle of elections every year and must go back to when polls were conducted once every 5 years. The committee also said that the rule ought to be one election once every 5 years. Now, the Standing Committee on Personnel, Public Grievances and Law and Justice, it said in 2015 that massive expenditure is incurred for separate polls and that policy paralysis arises because of different polls being held in different times. It also goes on to say that it leaves an impact on the delivery of essential services, and there is a burden, and there is a crucial burden on manpower during elections. Now, the Law Commission of India, in its draft back in 2018, said that one election is not possible within the existing framework and that appropriate amendments to the Constitution need to be made. It also went on to say that 50% of state legislatures must ratify the constitutional amendment. Now, the history of this, the history of one nation, one election, it goes back all the way to 1983 when the Election Commission first mooted the idea. In 1999, the Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy Commission backed the idea, saying it's a good thing. In 2003, then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee had initiated consultations. He took up the matter with the Congress and with Sonia Gandhi, and they were receptive to the idea initially. In 2010, leader of the opposition at that time, L.K. Advani, took it up with the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, but it was a non-starter. In 2014, the BJP pushed for one nation, one election in its manifesto. In 2017, the Niti Aayog prepared a working paper declaring one nation, one election. And then in 2019, the then Chief Election Commissioner Sunil Arora had said that this was an idea that was very desirable. It was a desirable goal. Now, what are the hassles? What are the complications and the complicated scenarios, if you will, for holding one nation, one election? Number one, what happens if there is a hung assembly? We've seen this in the past and we could see this in the future as well. Number two, if there is a no confidence motion which has been successfully adopted by an assembly and a government falls, what happens then? Three, what happens when the anti-defection law comes into effect? Certain number of people, certain number of MLAs defect and the anti-defection law takes precedence. And scenario number four, what if there is President's Rule 356 in any of these states? How will you then match what the state assembly's tenure is and what election tenure is? Let me now go across to our guests who are joining us. Charu Pragya is spokesperson of the BJP, Sujata Paul, spokesperson of the Congress Party, Anjali Rai, spokesperson of the Aam Aadmi Party, Arun Anand is consulting editor with First Post. Charu Pragya, the question that's being asked is, if you are indeed serious about one nation, one election, why have just one representative from the opposition? None of the regional parties are represented. None of the important players in the opposition are represented. And you have controversial figures like Ghulam Nabi Azad who are part of this committee. Please respond, ma'am.
Good evening, Zaka. And I don't know why you're calling Ghulam Nabi Azad ji as a controversial figure. He's been a Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. He is a long-standing politician and he's very well aware of the electoral process in India. That being apart, let's understand that the formation of this committee is the first step towards discussing in a very serious manner the implementation of one nation, one election. As you pointed out in your introduction, there are going to be some impediments, there are going to be some roadblocks that we will have to discuss and get rid of, and this is the beginning of it. This is where we start figuring out how do we make sure that we can achieve this, and we can achieve this in an easy way and in a way that is acceptable to everyone. The discussion about one nation, one election is not a new one. It was back in 1983, in fact, that the government said that we need to come back to this system again, which was available at the time of elections, but slowly and steadily it dwindled away. Our manifesto has always spoken about one nation, one election. President Kovind, in fact, on his first joint address to the parliament when he came to office, had spoken about this. See, this is beyond just talking about the money spent, the man force deployed, our armed personnel who have to leave their regular duties and be used for election purposes, because every single year, several states go into election. If I can take the example of this year, give or take a few months, there are 12 elections that are to happen plus our general elections. So you imagine all the machinery of the government, the teachers, the professors, so many schools which are used for voting, post offices, so many employees of the government, everything will come to a grinding halt. How many times? Several times. And if we can club it together, why not? Let me also add one more thing.
One second,
Can I get 10 seconds more?
You have spoken for a bit, for a fair bit. So let me ask Sujata Paul. The Congress Party has a representative in the form of Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, who is the leader of the opposition in the Congress Party in Lok Sabha. Why would the Congress Party be apprehensive of a committee that has been formed to look into one nation, one poll? The feasibility of it. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Why are you worried?
At a time when we should be discussing one nation, one PM forever and one friend of his, Mr. Adani, we are discussing this because the Prime Minister wants it to be this way, because he's rattled by the opposition unity. However, what is it that, when Charu Pragya ji just said that this has been in our manifesto, so since 2014, were you sleeping? Why didn't you try it? And now, when there are 6 months left for the polls, if you're going to come up with this, you don't even have the time for people to recover from ill thought of projects, schemes like your GST or your demonetization. So that is a big problem. You don't even have that time if you think that you're going to bring it now.
I'm
However,
sorry, I'm
coming
bringing
back-
you back to the rails.
Why are you
What is the
digressing? Oh my
Congress
God.
Party's objection
So much
to one
digression.
nation,
Speaking.
one poll? Your
Yes.
leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha is a member of
I'm
this
coming.
panel. Please explain
Yes.
to our viewers, why are you opposed to the idea of one nation, one poll? Please.
This is totally impracticable, unworkable, and why? You said that our leader of opposition is there in the panel. Do you know who it's going to hit the most? It's going to hit the regional parties. What are we? A federal structure. And do you know that they have limited resources? It is only the Prime Minister who wants to finish off all the smaller parties. This is what JP Nadda ji said in Bihar. We have established democracy in this country, and this is not what the Prime Minister wants. He wants Congress Mukt Bharat. And now, because he knows that he is facing defeat in the 2024 elections, he is coming up with this idea and floating a media trial balloon even before it's been brought in.
No,
but hang on,
whether
hang
or
on.
not, no,
Can I
one
respond,
second.
please?
Whether or not it's a media trial balloon, we'll wait and see. I don't think it's a media trial balloon. There's a committee, there's a former president who heads that committee, the members of that committee have been declared today. I don't think it's a trial balloon anymore. What may come of it, that's a separate matter. But Anjali Rai of the Aam Aadmi Party, why would a smaller party like yourself take objection to this? Because it works and it's convenient for you, because it's very clear in multiple elections in the past that the people of Delhi will have voted for the Aam Aadmi Party for the assembly, but the BJP for parliamentary elections. That works for you. Why should you be worried about one nation, one election?
Zata, we are not worried about anything. This is BJP who is worried because of the growing strength of India alliance. That's why they want to divert the attention of the country, and they want that we should be also rattled by this. But actually, they are rattled by the growing strength of India alliance. And the manner in which they have constituted this committee reflects their dictatorial attitude, against which all the partners of India Alliance are standing together. They have come together on one platform because of this attitude. They have come together to fight for the rising inflation, for unemployment. Please, can I finish? They have all come together because of this reason. They have come to save democracy and constitution. They have come together to stop increasing inflation, unemployment, and mitravad.
Is that the topic today? Zaka, amazing. Maybe you should change the topic of the debate. Let's discuss the alliance instead. It's amazing. The Congress spokesperson had nothing to say about one nation, one election. And same is the case with Aam Aadmi Party. Can I come in for exactly 30 seconds?
Let her finish, please. Let her finish.
Is she going to speak in between everybody?
Let her finish.
Yeah. So we have to save the credibility of our all four pillars of democracy, of all the probing agencies of the country. So we have come together, and they are rattled. They want to divert the attention, and they are completely confused and nervous, and they don't know what to do. That's why they have taken this step.
So let me ask Charu Pragya before I go to Arun Anand. Charu Pragya, you've been in office for 9 years and 6 months.
Thank you.
Why are you suddenly waking up to this idea at the fag end of your second term?
You know, Zaka, do you remember 2021? We did a series of webinars discussing one nation, one election. This has been in discussion constantly. Now, governance and reforms are not a magic wand that you wave. And this is not just about one nation, one election. This is a larger picture for India, whether it is one nation, one tax, one nation, one law, one nation, one road tax, one rank, one pension. This is a continuity of the reforms that our country needs. Now, I just want to point out two very quick things. First of all,
one second, please. Let Charu finish.
Want to discuss, and no, two facts I want to put forward. First of all, in 2019 elections, along with the Lok Sabha polls, 3 states had their state elections as well. Andhra Pradesh does not have a BJP government. Odisha does not have a BJP government, and the third state was Arunachal Pradesh. So None of these states complained. In fact, none of the electorate complained. In fact, they were so aware that they knew who they wanted to vote for in the state election. They knew who they wanted to vote for in the parliamentary elections. That being said, the whole discussion that the opposition has started, that this is rattled by the opposition meet, what did they achieve in this meet apart from one grand photo shoot?
Okay.
Did you come up with a common minimum program?
So,
Did you choose a convener? To PM face, you can't even choose a logo.
The issue is the opposition
rattled.
is saying, A, it was time to the India Alliance meeting. B, this is simply not feasible. How are you going to go to, let's say, for example, just for devil's advocate argument's sake, how are you going to go back to a Siddaramaiah who just got elected as Chief Minister 3 months ago and say, oh, by the way, forfeit the remainder of your tenure, we're going to have one nation, one poll? How are you going to go to a Sukhwinder Sukhu who got elected 6 months ago? How are you going to go to a Bhupendra Patel who got elected again 6 months ago and say, forsake the rest of your term, we're going to have one nation, one poll? It's not going to work. It's an impractical idea.
Zaka, we are in run-up to 2024 elections. And any party which is in power, basically, they are a lot of moves which you are going to see. They will be political moves, and there is nothing wrong or illegitimate in if a party which is in power or whether a party which is in opposition is trying to take some political advantage out of a move also. So I would not say that it might not be a purely, a kind of an administrative move. Yes, there is politics basically involved in it, but I don't see there is anything wrong in it. If there is something good which is being done for country, and if a political party is taking some advantage out of it, so I think that there's nothing wrong in it. One. Second, that you are right that there are going to be major challenges, but I think this committee's recommendations are not going to be binding on the government. So if the regional parties' concerns are not taken into account by this committee, probably they can be incorporated later on. These parties also have a representation in the parliament, and it is not so they can speak there also when the recommendations will come. It's going to be a long.
How do you explain or justify to regional parties, none of whom find representation in this committee? The only opposition member who has been included in this committee is Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary of the Congress Party. They are saying that this is not representative.
See, there has to be a limit to if you want to make a committee workable, so there has to be, you have to impose a certain limit in terms of having, the number of members. There are too many members. I think, then it becomes, difficult to conduct the meetings of the meeting and reach at a conclusion, especially when we are in a highly politicized atmosphere.
Okay.
I also want to bring in just one small point. I was looking at the data. In 2019 elections, there were around 10.5 lakh booths were set up, and the total cost of elections, which included the campaigning by political parties, was around 60,000 crore. It was the most expensive election actually in the world.
Yeah.
Even the US had a less expensive election. So one is this point that this is sheer wastage of money basically, which can be saved. And another small point, which hasn't been brought into the discussion so far. See, every year whenever there are assembly elections, the model code of conduct is imposed. And if you look at the number of working days during which the government cannot, initiate a lot of developmental and everything comes to a standstill. So that's a substantial chunk, and these are taxpayers' money on which governments are run, which is going waste. So these are the two small points also which I wanted to make.
So let me ask Sujata Paul, Arun made this point about 60,000 crores being the cost of the 2019 election. Let's leave aside how much political parties spend, how much individual candidates spend. Just the conduct of that election was 4,000 crores as per the Election Commission of India. Now, my point is, ma'am, for a party like yours, the Congress Party, which keeps saying again and again, oh, we get very few of these electoral bonds and corporate donations. And in fact, even recently, there was an RTI which seemed to suggest that BJP had bulk of the electoral bond contribution that was coming in to political financing. If that is the case, then why shouldn't the Congress Party welcome one nation, one poll? Because you just need to spend once in 5 years. You don't need to spend every 6 months for state elections and then eventually for the Lok Sabha.
You're absolutely wrong, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're talking about elections, what happens is that if you're going to have elections at one point of time, it's not just about the cost. It's also about one, accountability of the leaders who are going to be on their toes because they know that they're going to be state elections separately and compared to Lok Sabha elections. Second, when you are deploying forces, this is not US. Why are you comparing it to the US? They don't have population like ours, right? And when you have to deploy the central forces, where are you going to take them? To what extent are you going to be able to manage the country at that point of time, because they'll have to be deployed all across the country. Third point, when you're talking about the model code of conduct being in place, obviously when the model code of conduct is in place, there are things that cannot be done and there are things that can be done. But are you trying to say that regional parties are not going to be affected? Supposing the central government comes and announces a central scheme, can you imagine the impact it's going to have on the regional parties? They will not even be able to contest elections. This is what I've been trying to tell
I'll
you
give
right from the
Charu
beginning.
Pragya the
Now,
final word. I have to wrap up.
point.
Ma'am, last 1 minute.
Okay.
Charu Pragya, the fact of the matter is you're not having regional party representation. You're not having any federal representation. It's just you, one representative and one representative of the Congress party. The opposition, a bulk of the regional parties are saying this is anti-federal, this is anti-constitutional. Please respond, ma'am. And I've got to wrap up in 1 minute.
Yeah, very quickly, Zaka, if Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary ji is good enough to represent as the leader of opposition in the parliament, I'm sure the opposition should be happy to have him represent them on the committee. That being said, the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which is formed of representatives of a lot of political parties, not just one or two or three, they've given a positive report for One Nation, One Election in 2015 and 2018. The last thing is that we are looking to increase voter turnout also. Once every 5 years, everybody can go back home and vote. India is going to become a democracy where everybody likes to vote. Lastly, Sujata mentioned that the leaders will not be on their toes. Madam, this is new India.
They
Leaders are kept on their toes by the people of India. Even Rahul Gandhi can be
Okay, I got to wrap up. Thank you very
happen.
much to all our guests. We've got to leave it at that. We'll see. This is going to be a big theme going up in the run-up to 2024, whether the country is ready for One Nation, One Election. It certainly seems to be ready and decked up for the G20 summit